Good morning, everybody. This is another Dvar Torah from again David, Los Angeles. The pasuk says the new sefer this week, the book of Vayikra, and the first pasuk in the Torah says Vayikra el Moshe, and Hashem called Moshe, Vayidaber Hashem elav me'oel moed, and Hashem speaks to him from the tent of meeting. From here, our Hachamim, our sages say something astonishing. Actually, hard to believe. If the sages wouldn't say it, we couldn't say it. And it says Hachamim, Kol Talmid Hacham she'en bo de'ah, any Talmid Hacham that doesn't have, as we translate de'ah to mean good characteristics, does not have any derech eretz, nevela tovah yemenu. Even a carcass of an animal, a dead animal, is better than the person, than the Talmid Hacham. And we see this here with Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? We're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the granddaddy of prophecy, the granddaddy of wisdom. He took us out of Egypt. Through him, all the miracles happened. The splitting of the sea, the giving of the Torah, right? And what do we see? What happened? He didn't go into the Mishkan, into the tent of meeting, until HaKadosh Baruch Hu called him. In other words, if he would have gone into the Mishkan without being invited, then nevela tovah yemenu. That would be a lack of derech eretz, a lack of good characteristic trait. And even in a vela, a dead animal, a carcass is better than Moshe Rabbeinu. And the question is, how could this be possible? For such a small thing like that, what do Hachamim mean? Because he didn't go in without being asked to go in? Don't forget, we're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the one who built the Mishkan himself, who is the one that HaKadosh Baruch Hu testified about him and said, Bechol beiti ne'eman hu. He's B'chol beiti, in all of my house. He's ne'eman, he's a trustworthy servant. He's like my own son. A son needs permission to walk inside the house. This is after all Moshe Rabbeinu. So what do Hachamim mean over here? That if he wouldn't be invited in by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even nevela tovah yemenu, where are we going to? Who are we talking about? The Hachamim answer and say that this was a big struggle actually that Moshe Rabbeinu had, not to go into the Mishkan, because this was his house. He built the Mishkan. He was the ben bayit. He was the son in the house of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to say. He was on such a level with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He had such a relationship. He was like a child. A child doesn't need permission. And it was a struggle for Moshe Rabbeinu not to go inside. But the only reason why Moshe Rabbeinu didn't go inside without being called to go in, even though it was his Mishkan, he built it, he was a ben bayit, and all of that, was for one reason only, because of derech eretz. Derech eretz stopped him from going inside. What caused him not to go inside was his characteristic trait of good behavior, his power of derech eretz that he had. No, I'm not going in. This is my house. I'm still not going in until HaKadosh Baruch Hu invites me inside. And if he would have gone in, can you believe it? Hachamim would have said about him, nobody less than nevela tovah yemenu. That even a dead animal is better than him. Unbelievable. There's a story told over by Rabbi Zalman Meltzer, who was once traveling to Hebron, and he used to go to Hebron from Yerushalayim. This was already years ago, before the state of Israel. He used to go to Hebron, travel from Yerushalayim to Hebron, and he used to go and to the Kivrei HaTzadikim. He used to go to Hebron, to the Ir Avot, to see Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, where they were buried in Me'arat HaMachpelah. And on this journey, he used to go once a year. He used to take the best student of the yeshiva. One time he took with him the best, that he thought was the best student of the yeshiva. And while he was there, he went to visit the Saba of Slobodka, the Rosh Yeshiva of Slobodka, who was living in Hebron at that time. So he went and he knocks on his door in Hebron and he says, Rabbi, I bought you this time the Ilui of the yeshiva. The world is going to hear from him. He's a young boy now, but trust me, he's going to be the next Gadol Hador. So the Saba Mislobodka, the rabbi invites Rabbi Zalman and the student to come inside his house. And he sits them down, he says, come in, he smiles. And while Rabbi Zalman and the Saba was talking together, these two giants of Torah, he notices that the young student is taking the sugar cubes and putting it in his mouth and sucking it. You know, like people like to dip it in the tea and suck it. It's a common thing. And the Saba Mislobodka didn't like that. Slobodka, they were very, they worked a lot on the Midot, learning Musa, how to fix your characteristic traits up. And he didn't like that at all. And he felt that that's a lack of derech eretz, that this young student is behaving in such a way in front of such two great people. So in the end, before they went out, the Saba said to the young student in front of Rabbi Isa Zalman, "Can I ask you a few questions?" He says, "Of course." So he asked him, he said to him, "Who is more important, a person who is alive or a person who is dead?" So the boy is laughing at the Saba. He says, "I thought you were going to ask me a question, something in the Gemara, something deep. Obviously a person who's alive." He says, "Okay, who's more important, a lion who's alive or a lion who's dead?" He says, "Rabbi, please, don't embarrass me. A lion who's alive." He says, "Okay, who's more important, a dog who's alive or a dog who's dead?" He says, "Rabbi, of course a dog who's alive." And he says, "Okay, who's more important, a dog who's alive or a lion who's dead?" He says, "Rabbi, this is a pasuk in the Navi. It says, Tov kelev achai, it's better a dog who's alive, me'ariyeh hamed, than a lion who's dead." So he says, "Okay, now you got all that correct. Let me ask you one more question." He says, "Can you tell me, is there any way you can tell me, I'll ask you this riddle, that a person who's alive and a nevela who's dead, a dead piece of animal, can you show me anywhere where the dead piece of animal is even more important and better than the person who's alive?" So the boy, who's the Ilui of the yeshiva, says, "Rabbi, there is no such concept like that at all. A person who's alive is always better than a nevela who's dead. There's no such thing." So the Saba said to the boy, "Here you are totally wrong." He says, "Hachamim teach us, Kol talmid hacham she'en bo da'at." Any talmid hacham that doesn't have good characteristic traits, he's lacking derech eretz, nevela tova hayemenu. Even a dead carcass, a dead piece of animal is better than him. Rabbi Isa Zalman didn't like this. Rabbi Isa Zalman, the rosh yeshiva of the boy, he got the hint. And he told this boy to leave the room a second. And he said to the Saba, "Rabbi, how could you say this about this Ilui?" So the Saba said, "I am telling you, if he doesn't change his Midot, the way he was sucking the sugar in front of us is a lack of derech eretz. And if he does not change his way and manners, he will not only know the world, not only become any big leader, but he will be a nothing. And I'm telling you this." And Rabbi Zalman said to the Rabbi, "Rabbi, I think normally I don't argue with you, but here you're mistaken." At the end of the story, Rabbi Meir Hadash, the Rosh Yeshiva of Ohel Hanan, said he took a track to see who this boy is, and he knows exactly who this boy is. And he said, unfortunately, the Saba Mislabodka was correct, and what came out of this boy was nothing. He was the biggest Ilui of the yeshiva. He didn't change his characteristic traits. He didn't behave better in manners, and he became a nothing. How much is Hachamim correct? A person, you hear such a story, you need to be frightened from such a small little thing, just to suck a sugar cube. If you don't change in Midot, what could come out with you? And nothing. Morai v'Rabotai, this is something very important in life we have to realize. Because what's the difference between an animal and a human being? The difference between an animal and a human being is the neshama that a human being has, is the da'at that the human being has, is the knowledge, the wisdom we have that the animals don't, the intelligence that a human being has. If we don't use that intelligence, that knowledge that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us, that da'at, that derech eretz, that good characteristic trait, then we're not better than an animal. It makes so much sense. Then animals are better than us. We have such a intelligence that Hashem has given us to differentiate between good and bad, which animals don't. So we have to use that. We have to use what is derech eretz, what is not. That's our purpose in life. So Hachamim tell us we have to be very careful. Sometimes people go to do a mitzvah, and while they're going to do a mitzvah, they push the line, they push other people. But we have to be careful and realize, don't let the Yetzer Hara get into us. Moshe Rabbeinu, if he would not have got permission to go into the Mishkan, the Torah would have said about him that a dead carcass is even better than him. How much more do we have to work on ourselves and our characteristic traits to be a better person? With the help of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we will be helped, and we have Torah, mitzvot, and maasim tovim. Amen v'amen.